what we're going to talk today about is customer experience as a business strategy. When I talk about the 9-point marketing plan, a lot of times I focus on the planning part before, who the audience is, what the message is, where the audience is listening, the channels. And the during is lead capture, lead opt-in, lead nurture, the follow-up, the continuing relationship building, and the sale, the close. I don't spend as much time talking about the customer experience, the lifetime value of the customer, and the referral review reputation. And I'm trying to correct that right. The next couple sessions are about those three components of the 9-point marketing plan. In the last several weeks, we've talked in GHL Business Launch about the business systems from several different perspectives. We talked about instability within the business itself. We've talked about business model collisions when the business hasn't defined its own path. We looked at identity and economics. We looked at pricing, particularly pricing in a global economy. Making sure all these things are muted. I did see a like, so thank you. Oh, and a comment even. Thank you, Levi. We looked at implementation of how businesses operate, depending on what their structure of that business is supposed to be. And last week we looked at automation, and particularly one of the points of ethical automations was automation shows what your system is doing internally, and the customer experience shows what that system feels like externally. And that is the point where we transition from last week's sessions to this week's session. Because when people talk about customer experience, the conversation almost immediately moves to customer service, responsiveness, friendliness, retention, going the extra mile, delighting the customer, mechanics like a holiday gift basket. And yes, all of those things can matter. But that's not what this lesson is about. This is not a training session on retention strategies. It's not a training on how to improve customer service. It's not a training on how to improve specifically the customer experience, although it is about customer experience. It's a structural lesson because the customer experience is not mainly a matter of intention. It's not mainly a matter of attitude. It's not mainly a matter of trying harder to please the customer. Customer experience isn't what you promise. It's what your system delivers. And the realization that I want to drive home today is this. My client experience is not based on my intention. It is the direct result of that my system produces. That matters because many business owners and many operators think that they are creating one kind of experience while their system actually delivers another. And when that happens, unfortunately, many of us blame the customer. We say things like, my clients are difficult. My clients expect too much. People don't read the instructions. People are impatient. Nobody follows directions. People don't respect boundaries. And sometimes those things are true because the reality is people are crazy. But many of the customer experience problems are not behavior problems. They are system problems that are manifested in behavior. So the question for today is not, how do I create a better customer experience? The question is, what system is producing the experience that my customer is experiencing? What system is producing the experience that my customer is having right now. Which is why the idea for today is really quite simple. Your system decides the experience. Customer experience has the strategy. When people hear the word system, especially in a business conversation, they will often think about things like the CRM, the tools, the workflow, the onboarding sequence, the calendar, the automations, the support desk, the client portal, and yes, all of those things matter. But in GHL Business Launch, in this context, when we talk about system, we mean something deeper. We mean a system is the structure that determines how decisions, responsibilities, and outcomes connect inside the business. And this definition matters because customer experience does not come from the external visible surfaces alone. The customer experience is what the customer or the client feels when your internal system touches them. And that's why we're going to say this plainly. The client doesn't experience your intention. The client experiences your system. They do not experience the diagram that's in your head. They do not experience the explanations you would give if they ask why something happened. They do not experience the good intention you had when you built the offer. They experience the sequence of decisions, delays, handoffs, messages, boundaries, and responsibilities that actually reach all the way to them. So when the client feels confused, reassured, delayed, supported, ignored, well-guided, pressured, respected, overmanaged, appreciated, frustrated. Those are not random emotional events. Those are the direct downstream outputs, which are the external feeling of the internal system. Your system decides the experience. And if the system is misaligned, the result is predictable, not because the system is morally bad, not because the business owner is stupid, and not because the customer is difficult. The system is misaligned because that same system, because it's not correct for the situation. The exact same system may be perfectly appropriate in one context and deeply unhelpful in another. This is not a value judgment. It is an alignment question. When we drafted this presentation, I was actually saying if the system is wrong, the result is predictable. And I realized I was even that was creating an impression of a value judgment. It's not that the system is wrong. The system is correct in the right circumstance. But if the circumstance is misaligned, then you have a confused system trying to execute a product for which it is not designed. A system can be functional and still be misaligned for the promise that was being made, the business model that is being operated, or the client expectation that is being created. And when this happens, the experience goes sideways in ways that are actually quite predictable. The core idea for today is very simple. The system is based on decisions, which lead to actions that result in the customer experience. The system is the hidden structure The decisions are what the business has determined about ownership, scope, escalation, timing, boundaries, handoff, etc. The actions are what the client actually sees, the client actually experiences, but the client experience is what the client concludes and feels as a result of that experience. So if the reality of the system says no one clearly owns follow-up, the offer language is broad and vague, the support boundaries are unclear, initiative is not expected internally, handoffs are informal, and the client is expected to infer what is included, then the decisions downstream from that will all reflect that. And the actions will reflect that. And predictably, the client experience will reflect that. The client is going to end up saying things like, I'm not sure who's handling this. I have to repeat myself. I thought that was included. I don't know what's to expect next. These people seem nice, but they are not organized. Or the classic, why am I managing this? And the important thing is this, those feelings are not just personality reactions. They are often the direct and predictable consequence of a system. And this is why I say that customer experience is strategic. Because we're not talking about emotions in the abstract. Because what the customer is experiencing is an outward expression of the system that the business designed or failed to design. The client can behave very differently in different systems. The exact same person will react with a system differently than will react with system A differently than with system B. If system A is aligned with their expectations, the experience is smooth and productive. If the client is not wanting to be in system B, the experience will be confrontational. And this is very important because many operators are looking at the client and saying things like, that client is needy, that client is rude, the client expected too much, that client is high maintenance. The client kept changing the scope. And yes, sometimes clients do strange things. But very often what we are actually seeing is not simply a domineering personality or a demanding personality. What we are seeing is a response to the system they think they entered that is different than the one they actually entered. Because if the system is coherent, the same client can appear calm, cooperative, grateful, and trusting. But if the system is chaotic and confusing, that person may appear impatient, skeptical, demanding, or difficult. So one of the most useful things that we can do is stop asking things like, what is wrong with this client? And start asking, what is my system doing that is producing this behavior? That question moves us away from blame and towards structure that we can control. So I'm going to do a couple comparisons here. Let's walk through the same client with the same practical need, but a different system and therefore a different experience. Imagine a client saying, I need help getting this software to work. That exact same need, that exact same statement can enter into many different systems. And a mismatch can often occur when the business and the client understand the product differently. Not because either side is evil and not because either side is dumb, but because they are using the same words to mean different things. In a SaaS environment, the system is going to say, this is a product. It is primarily self-service. The documentation matters. The support boundaries are real. And you, the customer, are expected to operate inside that defined boundary. And if the client enters that system understanding it correctly, the experience can be efficient because they expect access, they expect documentation, they expect a repeatable interface, and they expect the support will remain within the boundaries. They might not love the limitations, but they understand the game they're playing. On the other hand, if that same client expects something else, if the client is expecting strategy, handholding, done-for-you services, ongoing initiative, interpretation, they're going to be disappointed, and that disappointment from their perspective is completely reasonable. Why? Because they did not think they were buying a software subscription. They thought they were buying an agency relationship. They heard a marketing message that says things like, we help businesses grow. We streamline your marketing. We get you up and running. We make this easy. We help businesses scale. And they translated that into, this is my marketing team. But from the operator's perspective, the thought is, no, this is a software as a service. We gave you access. We gave you onboarding. We gave you the login. We gave you the training. We gave you the support. You're on your own. But from the client's perspective, the words sounded like, you will not have to figure this out yourself. It's a system mismatch. The business sold access. The client heard ownership. The business sold a subscription. The client heard a relationship. The business sold tools. The client heard scale, growth, outcomes, results. And if the business is actually operating a DIY or productized service model while speaking agency language, the system is misaligned. The system that the business, the agency created, is misaligned. And when the customer becomes frustrated, that's not a customer behavior problem. That's a system problem that was created by the business. And if we move it slightly to SwaS, software with a service, software with a service adds a service layer. There is still a productized service, but the system implies setup help, implementation support. There's some more guidance. There's some more relationship. There's some more human interpretation of how we're going to apply it in your situation. And when the business is offering those additional personal touches, the same client is going to behave more patiently because the system has told them that guided help is part of the experience. When the messaging is aligned, the client can think, okay, this is not a full agency, but it's also not just software. This is someone who's trying to help me get a result. That will smooth some of the conflicts by smoothing the boundaries. And this expectation can work really well if the delivery system matches it. But if the business is advertising SwaS, but actually only delivering SaaS-style boundaries, then again, you get disappointment. Not because the customer is irrational, but because the expected system and the actual system are misaligned. Or if the amount of agency service is not clear enough. The agency, the business might imagine, yes, the boundaries are grayer, but there's still a boundary there. And this is where the gray marketing guy zone comes in. We'll get to that one in a minute. Because if the person thought they bought SwaS and they get SaaS, they're going to feel like, I thought someone was going to help me with this. I thought setup support meant more than just a help article, you're on your own. I thought implementation meant someone would actually take initiative to get results. And again, these reactions can make sense from their side if the marketing message implied more than the delivery path actually carries. And if we shift again and we talk about the actual agency model or even the business partner model, the marketing department model, when the client enters into the relationship, believing that the agency or partner relationship is what they bought, they're going to expect strategic thinking, initiative, interpretation, ownership of results. And they're going to expect to be able to ask you to tell me what to do next. And this is where problems might get labeled as client entitlement when they are actually expectation congruency problems. If the business is actually offering a narrowly defined productized service, ads, for example, or SEO, for example, the client may end up feeling underserved. The agency may think we delivered exactly what was in scope. We did exactly what was promised. This client expects too much. But the client is feeling like, I hired a marketing partner. Why should I be doing the strategic thinking myself? Why am I managing the initiatives? Why do I feel like I bought a package when I thought I hired a guide? And in this mismatch, notice the agency is trying to market a scalable productized service package, but the client heard, this is my marketing guy at a price I cannot afford. This is my marketing guy at a price I cannot refuse. Those are not the same system. And once that relationship starts, the client's requests are not unreasonable from their perspective and understanding of the relationship. But this matters because the mismatch was not about greed or malicious intent. It was the fact that the client thought they entered into one system, but they got another. Or imagine what I call business model A, the support agency role, the support entity role. A real support model says, here's what we help with, here's what we don't help with, here's what we escalate, here's how you handle it on your own. These are the things that you just have to take the documentation and figure out. This is what we support. This is what we don't support. Here's how our response and ticketing system works. This is what our support means, practical. And in that system, the client will often behave better. Their expectations are not unreasonable. Why? Because the boundaries were coherent in the first place. The expectation is stable. The decision path is clear. The client is responsible for doing their marketing. The support agency is responsible to make sure the system does what it's supposed to do to support the marketing. The support model does not pretend to be consulting. It does not pretend to be agency ownership. It does not talk about things like, I help you scale. Well, you're doing your own marketing. You decide whether you're going to scale or not. It does not pretend to be a strategic planning relationship if it doesn't have one, if it doesn't include one, if it doesn't provide one. The point is, I read these posts in the social media groups, in the Facebook groups, and I can tell you many of these difficult client stories are really system mismatch stories, expectation mismatch stories. Frustration induced by differences of understanding of the goal. Because the client entered one system, but they expected something differently based on the marketing message. The same client will behave differently in different systems. and your system is what decides that experience. And we're going to do another comparison. Let's talk about the freelancer versus the systems analyst consultant. The same project, the same technical work, but it's a different system. Imagine the client comes into the system, into the environment, and says, "Can you help us set this up?" When the freelancer or gig worker task accomplishment system encounters that message, or the collaborator, the consultant, the systems analyst, the technical advisor system encounters that message. Here's where a lot of people accidentally give away consulting and advisory labor without compensation. Because in the freelancer posture, the system says, I provide a narrow scope. It's execution focused. I don't have ownership. My delivery is task-based. It's a project logic versus an advisory logic. And this experience can be very efficient if the boundaries are clear. When the client says, build this landing page, and the provider says, yes, that's the task. Here's the price. Here's the delivery. That can work. And it'd be very helpful for both parties because the expectations are very clear. But if the boundaries are fuzzy, the client might start pushing outward. And it's usually not malicious. It's just natural because questions come up during the course of the project. And if the client entered into the system without a clearly defined boundary of what was being bought, the client starts thinking, this person is helping me solve the problem of what this landing page does. But the provider is saying, I'm only doing the task of providing the page. Disappointment on both parts is already on the way. They just don't see it yet. Because from the client side, the requests can often sound very, very reasonable. What do you think we should do here? What should we write on this page, on this paragraph? Which offer would work better? How should this fit inside the rest of our campaign? What should happen after someone opts in? Oh, while you're looking at this landing page, can you look at this too? The typical one will be the copy in the email. They're not asking for random extras from their own point of view. They're trying to get the value that they think they purchased in the first place. And they understand that the system that they are building is all one cohesive system. Meanwhile, the provider is thinking, wait a minute, that's strategy, that's consulting, that is outside the scope of this landing page, and I'm being treated like a marketing department. And both sides feel justified in their confusion over why the system isn't. The real conflict is not only about the scope of the project, it's a mismatch between the service system being sold and the relationship system being perceived. So yes, many of these cases, the freelancer is effectively expected to provide consulting or advising without compensation. And that expectation may be growing not because the client is exploitive by nature, but because the system implied problem solving rather than task execution. In contrast, if that's saying, can you help me build this? Question entered into a collaborator, consultant, systems analyst, or technical advisor system, the relationship begins differently because this operator starts with a whole bunch of consultative questions. What is the system? What is the decision path? What problem are we trying to solve? Where does this landing page fit inside the larger marketing strategy? What should happen before we build it? What should not be automated yet? What are the boundaries? What are the edge cases? And this can cause the relationship to feel slower at first and is maybe more expensive and certainly causes more friction at the beginning of the relationship. But in the end, the customer experience often becomes stronger over time because the system is more coherent. There's more diagnosis. There's more explicit ownership, more interpretation, more expectation management, and importantly, advisory work is named as advisory work. Systems thinking is inherently part of the relationship, not a hidden extra that the client keeps pulling out of a freelance operator for free. Again, these are the exact same technical skill regarding the landing page, but two different systems which result in a different experience for the client. So if someone is saying, my clients always want more than I scoped, my clients treat me like their employee, my clients expect strategy when I only do implementation, we should be asking, what system did the client think they entered? What system did the client think they entered? Because scope frustration is very often not a system output problem. It's not a controlling personality problem. It's a client who thinks they're in one system when their business is offering a different system. Here's another really simple comparison. Same inquiry comes into the business, but there's a different handoff system and a different experience. And I'm going to make one consequence very explicit. The client may end up feeling like they have to act as their own project manager or own account manager when they're interacting with the business. That feeling is one of the clearest symptoms of a weak handoff system. In a clean handoff system, the inquiry is routed cleanly, qualification happens once, ownership of the situation is clear, obvious, information is captured cleanly, the next step is known, the client is not expected to repeat themselves. If anything changes, a person owns the transition to that next step. The client experience is coherence, trust, calm, professionalism, momentum. And they start saying things like, these people are organized. I know what happens next. I don't have to manage them. I get the result I need. Notice the phrase, I don't have to manage them. This is a huge part of customer experience. If the customer feels like they have to do the follow-up, they feel like they have not had a good experience, even if they get the exact same end result. If they feel like they are provided information flows to them smoothly, they know where they are in the process, the exact same outcome might be the result, but they feel like they have had a good experience. A good experience will often mean like the client does not feel like they have to carry project management burdens that belong inside the business. But in a confused handoff situation, multiple people are touching the same issue simultaneously from different perspectives, and no one owns when it transitions to the next step. The same information is requested from the client more than once because different people are gathering information and they're not sharing it coherently. Automation and human interactivity overlap awkwardly. A reply will come in from the client and the automated sequence keeps running. The client is getting generic updates with no real value, and the follow-up by human beings is inconsistent, and no one is quite sure who is responsible for resolving the case. In that situation, the client experiences uncertainty, duplication, fatigue, a loss of trust, and they start saying things like, do these people talk to each other? Why am I repeating myself? Who is actually handling this problem? And why do I feel like I'm coordinating the business? Why do I feel like I'm coordinating my account? Why am I my own project manager? That is the client discovering that the system is not actually carrying the work. The client is carrying it. They're compensating for the system. They're acting as their own project manager or their own account manager because the business has not clearly accepted the responsibility to create its own structure. And the amusing thing is, this is often the moment when businesses start labeling the client as frustrating. But from the client's perspective, they're simply trying to create coherence where the system failed to create it for them. What the business calls a handoff, the client is experiencing either as coherence or chaos. That is the external consequence. Not because the people are bad, but because the system produced the experience. We're going to bring Alex back into the mix just briefly. We're going to look at Alex under two different systems. When we look at our original version of Alex 1, Alex is in that vague gray. He's my marketing guy generalist zone. He does a little bit of everything. It's websites, funnels, CRM help, automation, support, random strategy ideas, a little bit of everything, email copy. And the client likes that flexibility at first. It seems helpful, responsive, capable. It's kind of a, wow, this person can do a lot. But the system underlying Alex's service is unstable. There's no clear distinction between what he builds and what he supports. What level of strategic advising service he provides. Which portion of the client's marketing system he has ownership of. What he's responsible to implement, what he's responsible to take initiative on versus what he's doing as a task based on their requests. And what begins as flexibility very quickly becomes this gray ambiguity. The client starts trying to fill in the blanks and they assume adjacent help is included. They expect interpretation and that causes them to blur scope. They assume initiative and it leads them to thinking things like, if he's building this, then surely he will tell me what should happen next in the system after that step. If he understands the CRM from a technical perspective, certainly he can advise on the process that someone would flow through in my marketing system. If he handles the automation, surely he can help shape the strategy around the automation. Why the automations even exist. We talked about that last week. If he fixes one thing, surely the connected thing is part of the same relationship. From Alex's side, all of those requests feel like scope creep. They feel like overreach. They feel like slowly being turned into a marketing department instead of a service provider. But from the client's perspective, why would they not think that way? The system never told them clearly otherwise. The relationship signaled breadth without defining ownership. So the client starts behaving in a way that Alex experiences difficult. They ask for more. They assume adjacent help. They expect interpretation. They blur scope, and they really don't understand where the relationship begins and ends. And from their perspective, why would they? The system never told them clearly one way or the other. And we contrast that with Alex version 2. After Alex has declared, this is what my business is. This is my business model. This is what I do. This is my clear offer. This is my clear role. These are my boundaries. This is my handoff. This is my support path. These are my referral partners. A clear indication of when strategy is part of the service and when it is not. Now the client is hearing, this is what I do, this is what I not do. This is where support begins, this is where consulting begins. This is when another specialist should enter the picture. This is what responsiveness means. This is what ownership means. And that Alex version 2 feels a lot less flashy. There's a lot less wow there. It's less seductive in the sales process because in the sales process, it's as much about what I don't do as if what I do do. But at that point, the client experience becomes cleaner, more stable, more trustworthy. The client knows what relationship they are in and what relationship they are not in. They know what comes next. They know what support means. They know what escalation means. Same operator, same technical capability, two different experiences, two different systems produce two different customer experiences. Very predictable. Your system decides the experience. So we're going to make this personal. These are not tactical questions. They are recognition questions. What part of your system is responsible for the experience that your client is currently having? Not what person, not what department, what part of the system? When a client feels confused, delayed, or unmanaged, what decision path inside your system produced that feeling? Because I guarantee that feeling didn't appear out of nowhere. Where in your system are clients adapting to your unclear ownership, unclear scope, or unclear handoff instead of being supported by a clear project management system? This question matters a lot. Your client will fail if you don't have an organized project management system. They can experience, they might not know why it happens, but they will know it's happening. This is a really good self-reflective. Pick up a mirror, look at yourself in the eye. What client behavior am I blaming on their personality when it's actually a response to my system? Because we will often ascribe to personality conflicts things that are the direct and predictable consequence of misunderstandings regarding the relationship, scope, ownership, and next steps. If you can answer those 4 questions honestly, even if it's in a negative, even if it, or maybe even especially if it's a negative answer, well, this is why how my business results suck. If you can come to that honest answer, the lesson has actually done its job. Not because you have a checklist, because you don't, but because you've started seeing how your system is creating the customer experience structurally. Today's lesson is not customer experience matters, because of course it does. That is too shallow. Today's lesson is customer experience is a direct output of the system design. The client does not experience your intention. The client experiences your system. Your messages, your handoffs, your ownership, your timing, your boundaries, your execution path, your follow-up logic, your clarity. Or, and this is important, your lack of those things. So the realization I want you to leave with is this. My client experience is not based on my intention. It is the result. My system produces. And if that is true, then this next conclusion also follows. If experience is produced by the system, then retention is not mainly a follow-up problem. It is not mainly a charming acts problem. It is not mainly a reminders problem. It is a predictable system design outcome. And that's where we're going next. Because if your system decides the experience, then over time, your system also decides whether the client stays. And if the client stays, after that, it also decides what the market sees, says, and repeats about that customer experience. So in the next few weeks, we're going to look at lifetime value of the customer and reputation as strategic levers. In conclusion, customer experience isn't only what you promise. It's what your system delivers. Your system decides the customer experience. And if the system is misaligned, the result is predictable conflict. If the system is aligned, understanding and mutual clarity is the predictable result every time. Thank you for thinking with me today.